So I'm just gonna get the Jenkins user. It's gonna be a const Jenkins user. And then in Node.js, if we want to access the environment variable, we have process.env dot, I'm gonna use all uppercase, so Jenkins base, Jenkins user, like that. So I need 4 of them. The second one is the user API token. The user API token. The third one is base URL. And the fourth one is a job token. Process.env Jenkins, or actually user API token. Then we have base URL, and finally job token. All right, so this builds the URL for Jenkins. And actually, now that I'm thinking, I think base URL doesn't really make sense, right? Because I'm calling base URL something else here. So let's call it full URL instead. So build full URL. Going back to handlers, we can use this name, build full URL. First parameter that I need to specify is the name of my job in Jenkins, which will be called deploy. You just need to make sure that we're using this name. Then the second parameter is the environment, which in this case is going to be deploy env. So this is going to be the full URL of Jenkins, and we also need a variable for the speech text, but I'm not going to define right now because it depends on what's going to happen. If the request fails or not, Alexa is going to give a different response. So that's why I'm going to use let, and I'm not going to assign anything to this variable. Then after this, we need to make the call. So get a response first. So const response, and then I need to call Jenkins. I'm going to create another function. So trigger, I'm going to call it trigger Jenkins. And of course I need the full URL. So let me just copy this name, go back to the helper. I'm going to do exports.trigger Jenkins. And I need the full URL. And remember that in the beginning we installed this package called request and request promise. And that's what I'm going to be using here to do a request to Jenkins. First, I need to define a few options for the request. So what I'm going to define is the URI, which is going to be the full URL. So full URL. Then the second thing is it's called resolve with full response. So basically I want to get back the HTTP status code to know whether it failed or not. And if I don't specify this, I won't get it back. So that's why I'm specifying the option resolve with full response, so we can get the code back and compare later. So resolve with full response. Then after that, we can just do the request. I'm going to use try in case it fails. And I'm going to catch the error. So in try, basically, I need the response again. And for this, we would have to import, so request. So that's the package, const request. Require request promise. And let me explain why we need request promise. If we're using request only, so we would have request, and here usually we would specify the options, and we could specify a function that will be called when the request is over. And if you're just developing a Node.js API, that would be completely fine. But what I noticed with the Alexa SDK, with the Ask SDK, is not going to wait for the callback function to be called. It's just going to return the text response, but it's not going to wait for anything to be processed. So that's why I was trying to avoid to use a callback function. I want to use async and await, so I can wait for the request. I force my function to wait for the request to come back with a response, and then I continue. Otherwise, like I said, the SDK will not wait for you to process whatever you need to process and then return the response. It's just going to return the text response. So let me just go back to just having options. And that's actually why I declared request promise at the top, so we can do async and await. But I'm not going to get into what promises are, because we could have a whole different video just on promises. But by using request-promise, that allows me to await for the request to come back. And because it's an await, I also need this to be an asynchronous function. Once I get the response, I want to return the status code because I want to make sure that this is 201. So when something succeeds in Jenkins, when you're able to call or trigger the job in Jenkins, it's going to return an HTTP code 201. So I want to make sure that that's the code we're getting back. So return response dot status code. And again, I'm only able to use this because I'm doing resolve with full response. But if there's an error, then let's just return the error. Okay, that's our trigger Jenkins function. Going back here, I have the full URL. Now, after I get the response, I'm basically just gonna do if response is 201, which means that it was successful, that my speech text is going to be,
I don't know what y'all think, but I think that's
I was able to successfully trigger Jenkins to deploy, or Jenkins to deploy the website to, and then environment. So the environment is gonna be deploy env. And just to make things a little bit funnier, so let's write, I hope the build succeeds. It would be very funny if it failed. Still a little laugh at the end. All right. So that's our speech text if it succeeds. I mean, not if the job succeeds, but if you're only able to trigger it. That's it. Only trigger it. Else the speech text is going to be, unfortunately, there was an error when triggering Jenkins. Go to the Jenkins console to check out what happened. All right. Then finally, the last thing we need is to return handler input dot response builder speak. And then we're gonna pass the speech text, and then get response. Now the last thing before we can actually execute this, so we need to go back to index.js. And here we only have launch requests, but we need to have all of the other functions as well. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use, so let me put this down. So I'm gonna do const, and I'm gonna declare different ones. So I need request handler, I need deploy intent. And then I'm just gonna grab all of them and put it here. So whenever we initialize our skill, we're gonna pass all of these handlers. And one thing I forgot actually that I just realized. So back here, we're calling trigger Jenkins and build full URL, but these functions are not defined in this file. They're defined in the helper file. So we need to import them. So I'm gonna do const. So we need build full URL. And of course that, I'm not primarily a Node.js developer, so I know that there must be quite a few things here that it's either not following best practice or Node.js developers wouldn't do, but this is basically just to show how this can be done. Okay, so we've got build a full URL and trigger Jenkins. So then we need require helper. Okay, so I believe this is everything that we need for our function. So in the next video, we're gonna deploy this to Lambda, and we're also going to develop the Jenkins pipeline. And if there's an error with the function, we can easily come back to the code, fix, and then re-upload. So that won't be a problem. And that's it. So I'll see you in the next video.